Welcome to our Play Well podcast series. My name is Marguerite Hunter-Blair and I am Chief Executive of Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today, we will be looking at supporting parents to discover the power of play. To explore this, we will hear from Evie Keough. Evie is the founder and CEO of Boromi, a play libraries charity. Evie has taught in primary schools from rural Dumfriesshire to central London, where she developed the idea for Boro boxes of toys for home play. She then won the 2017 Teach First Innovation Award and has been growing Boromi ever since. She is passionate about improving opportunities in the early years to improve future life outcomes for children. Here is our Learning and Development Officer, Jenny Lester, catching up with Evie.
Hi, Evie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. Hi, Jenny. Thanks for having me.
So I absolutely love the work that Boromi does in connecting school and home with play. And I was wondering if we could just start, if you could tell me, why is play so important in schools and at home?
Yeah, I mean, right from birth, children explore and make sense of the world around them through play. The foundation of every area of learning and development, really, cognitive, physical, social, emotional, is built through these kind of early exploratory, playful experiences, whether that's on our own or with a caregiver or a parent or a peer. As an organisation, we focus on the early years kind of sector. We work on that kind of 0 to 5 space. And when you think of play, I think most people probably imagine a small child. But why is that? There's no reason why that's the case. And actually, these instinctive learning behaviours don't just stop because a child starts school or walks through those school gates and reaches the age that we, as a society, kind of deem ready for school. It carries on. And I think we, as adults, if we were going to think of a time recently in our adult life where we've really learned something well, something new, we were most likely engaged in that kind of process. It was an iterative kind of problem-solving process that we enjoyed and maybe was with a peer or another human. But I think in answer to your question about why it's so important for schools and homes, that's it in a nutshell, really, because ultimately it's through those playful opportunities that we're providing that platform for the richest and most impactful learning experiences, how we truly learn.
Absolutely. And, all through nursery or early years settings, children are given provocations through play the whole time. And then day one of primary school can be a really big shock and a big change if that's not what's going through. And I think having play at home can really help through that transition and through that change. And that's what I really think I really love about Boromi. On the flip side to that, some parents can be resistant to play approaches in the classroom. There's this sort of idea that we're not in nursery anymore, you're at school, so shouldn't you be sitting at a desk? There can kind of be these misconceptions that our children are, oh, I hate it, just playing, whatever that means.
In air quotes for everyone that can't see.
Exactly. And they should be learning instead, play isn't learning. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how practitioners, so teachers or early years professionals, can support parents to discover the power of play for themselves to sort of challenge those misconceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is such an important question, and one that it really spans far wider than just parental misconceptions of this idea of just playing. By that, I mean system-wide misconception almost, in terms of the undervaluing of the role and the importance of play, and this, dare I say, dangerous separation of the word play from the word learning, and air quotes on both of those. I think one example that I really like to share when talking about this, and this is a slight tangent, but I think I really like to give this example because when looking at a vast number, and I know we've spoken about this before, Jenny, in the past, but a vast number of children's websites that I have seen kind of in my role, when you're going on to find some great resources, you often find, for example, that you'll see categories such as pretend play, construction play, board games, problem-solving toys, and then educational games where the alphabet and the numbers sit. And this is my pet hate. It really riles me because I just, messaging is so important. And that is, yes, it's a really small example, but a really valid example of a factor of what might actually be part of this kind of root cause when thinking about why a parent, for example, might feel this way. Whether messaging comes from a cultural or a societal context, there's all sorts of, it's very complex. It's important to be aware of these complexities and the bigger picture, I think, when thinking about how we can support parents to discover the power of play. And the messaging we're surrounded by is so important to that and integral to where those kind of feelings and beliefs and thoughts come from, whether it's at a national scale or even more of a microclimate. Just taking one school, for example, if this school is built upon a foundation that recognises the importance of child development and the research around how we know that children learn and prioritises and values play, then this kind of messaging and value of play is more likely to be understood and recognised and kind of disseminate through the families that are linked to the school as well. I've personally encountered many situations like this as well with Boromi, where either that understanding of play perhaps isn't there, or it's viewed as a nice addition or something that happens outside the parameters of learning. For example, people, I've genuinely had people say to me, it's really great that you get everyone playing. That's really nice. I think, yes, it is great that we get them playing, but I think what's really important is really fighting for the importance of the messaging behind why play is so important, and really fighting this rhetoric of just playing, because it's so important to do. And for me, and this looks different for everybody depending on your context and your setting, but I try and remember three things kind of when I'm in this situation, because I feel like it helps me have that next step, and so that I don't just smile when you're faced with this, they're just playing. Let's actually get down to the learning now. Let's put all this away and let's crack on. I think I try and remember these three words. So educate, demonstrate, and motivate. And for me, the first one is all about sharing this bigger picture. So educate on why play is so important, why this matters. For us, it's our ambition and why we do what we do. And whether whoever you're talking to, for example, if it's a parent, you could explain, for example, it's actually through play that a child best learns and develops. And when a child's playing, they're exploring and making sense of the world around them. It's like we said at the beginning, it's how we're built to learn as humans, and it's just educating on why that play is so important and why you're doing what you're doing. And then thinking about demonstrate and how you can demonstrate that impact and show the impact of what that activity has done, or what that play has done, or what that looks like for you in your context, whether it's sharing, for example, here's a fantastic video, I've learned so much about what's hidden in play by watching it. Let me show it to you. Or would you like to see some play in action? I'd love to talk you through it and kind of demonstrate that, because whoever you're talking to, it might be that understanding and kind of foundation of play and why is it important is not there. So it's just helping to educate and demonstrate on that. And then the third one being motivate. And again, it will look different on who you're talking to, but a parent, their kind of ultimate motivation is going to be their child's progress. The reason that they're asking that question is because they care about their child and they want their child to progress and do well in their kind of academia, but in their development as a whole. So yeah, I think it might sound a bit of a strange one, but for me, I find these three words really helpful to have a bit of a framework to go to when thinking about how to support the idea of what those misconceptions, I guess, about just playing.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to support people through that learning of the power of play and how it can help in so many different ways, and how it brings so much joy to lives of children and families. But once people are on board, like once they agree that this is a good thing to be doing, there can still sometimes be barriers to play at home. And I was wondering if you had any advice for teachers or other practitioners on how to help and support overcome those barriers.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. There are many barriers. Yeah, I mean, firstly, for all parents, like having the challenge of having the time, or knowing what to do or how to do it, or feeling confident to do it, or having the capacity to play together are real challenges. I think it's really important to recognise here as well, also that we don't all experience barriers and challenges equally or fairly. For some, challenges and barriers faced are far greater and significantly harder to overcome. And in terms of how practitioners can help parents to overcome these, the understanding of what those barriers are and how that family or that parent or parent, how they are experiencing it, is so critical to then being able to help them overcome or support or remove that barrier. That understanding is paramount, really. And I think a tip or a bit of advice there would be talk to those people that you're wanting to support to understand the barriers first. And then once you've got that understanding, that will help in guiding you in how to support with them, whether it's an awareness of the importance of play, or whether it's having the knowledge or just some simple ideas, or perhaps if it's time, how can you make the best use of time? Or if it's resources, then showing actually you don't need any resources, you can use everyday materials that you've got around the house, or whatever the barriers and challenges may be. The first step has to always be understanding them first, and from the words of the people that you're trying to support. That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of non-judgmental approach, because I think at Play Scotland, anytime I'm making something specifically for parents, but also for practitioners, I always want to make sure that the messaging is never like, you're doing this wrong and this is how you do it better. And it's always like, here are some ideas for how, if you want to, how you can try something new. Because I think, we have so many messages, mainly, I mean, to all parents, but specifically to women, being like, you're a bad mom if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And I never, ever want to feed into that. And I think, again, that's sort of like not making assumptions and actually talking to someone about what barriers there are for them, because you might think, oh, the problem for them is probably this and this, but you talk to them and it could be completely different. So I think that's really, really great advice.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think I was going to build on that point as well, definitely, in that a really helpful and really important message to share is exactly what you said, Jenny, in that it's not to view this as a problem that needs to be fixed. And that for us at Boromi is something we try so hard to kind of ingrain throughout our theory of change and why we do what we do and our whole approach to our programme. It's really key to have that distinction between that deficit perspective as a problem with a parent that needs to be fixed, through to actually viewing this problem from the outside in, from more of a system change in terms of, why are these barriers here? What are the circumstances that are surrounding, or the situation that's surrounding this family that is causing these barriers that they are then facing, and trying to view it as a far greater problem, because it is a far greater problem and it's a far more complex problem than this parent doesn't have time to play with their child. That isn't the problem. The problem that needs to be fixed is actually, we won't go down that route, but an incredibly complex problem in terms of the childcare and the working environment. And there's so much more at play there. So what's really important, and what, like I said, we try so hard to do, is viewing that problem or that situation from the outside in, like in terms of how to address it and how to support that family. Because ultimately that parent has all the want and the love and the desire for their child to do as best as they possibly can, build those foundations to thrive, to play with them, to give them the best start in life, or whatever age group that you're working within. It's not that want isn't not there. So it's thinking about what those challenges they're facing are, and it's not a problem of theirs that needs to be fixed. It's a more complex, greater problem than that. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, we know that some parents can find it hard to play at home for lots of different reasons that we've sort of mentioned, these sorts of barriers. And I was wondering, what are your top tips for parents or for practitioners to share with parents bringing that play into the home? And you've already kind of mentioned it, sort of like that, if you don't have lots of time, then making use of the time you have. So I was just wondering if you could share those sorts of top tips with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, a really key message of ours is play as a mindset. And the reason I really love to share this is because, like I say, it's one of our core messages, but also one of our ultimate goals as well, in that we're wanting to help build and nurture a playful mind with parents and with children and everybody really. And I think it's this idea of, for example, we don't need expensive resources and gadgets to play together at home or to play together wherever we might be. We can use everyday materials that we've got around the house, or frankly, we don't need resources a lot of the time. We can just play. And there are so many ways that you can build that play into the everyday. And having that playful mind is a foundation on which that you can do that. So
yeah, I think that playful mindset is so important. And I think before you've said, I've listened to you speak at the training that we ran recently, and you were talking about this playful mindset in the approach to everyday tasks. And I thought that was really interesting. So like, if you have to wait for the bus, why not play a game while you do it? And that's sort of like taking time when you have it to do something playful. Yeah, I think is really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's this idea of you don't need a set time to play. I think if I said the word play, quite often what would pop into someone's mind is two people sat together on the floor playing a structured activity. And yeah, that's also great. There's a wealth of learning opportunities in something like that. But this is why I think this idea of a playful mind is so important, because you can play. Like, play doesn't have to be this kind of time taken out of the day to sit down with something in front of you to play together. You can be playful to like you say, when you're sat on the bus, or when you're loading up the washing machine, or when you're in the shops walking around with a trolley. You can be playing little games or interacting in this playful way, or building in these kind of opportunities to engage in the world around you in a playful way, with nothing at all. You can just be doing that with nothing at all.
Absolutely.
Another phrase I really like to share is this idea of Instagram paralysis. And I think really important. I know we've discussed this before. I think it's so real. It's a really real barrier that I think lots of parents come up against, because we live in this world where we're surrounded by perfect examples of play. In every platform that we go on, whether it's on Facebook, I give Instagram a bad rap there because it's not just Instagram, but wherever we look, at Christmas time or whenever it might be, you're surrounded by all of these beautiful activities that you then think,
I made these Christmas cards for my child, and this wrapping paper, and these ribbons, and these decorations.
Exactly. And you think, I've not done that, therefore I've not played well with my child. And actually, I would argue almost the opposite is true, that if you're you don't need to spend so long on perfectly curated tough trays and beautiful activities to sit and play together with all these natural materials. Yes, it's lovely, it's wonderful, it's full of great opportunities, but I think fighting this Instagram paralysis is so important, because you don't need any of that stuff. Play is so much simple, isn't necessarily the right word, but it's simpler in the way that you don't need it. Like, you can play together with nothing, like we said, or with very basic everyday materials. Grab a pair of shoes out the cupboard, or you finished a toilet roll. Brilliant. Think of all the things that you can do with that one toilet roll, or a pair of socks, or a pile of spoons. Like, there's so much you can do just with very basic everyday materials. Often, I think, if we're surrounded by too many examples of what we are told is perfect play, then that can be quite dangerous, because then you think, I haven't got time to do that, therefore I haven't got time to do it at all. And
exactly,
fighting against that's so important.
Yeah, because if you don't have time to set up a table with like a tough tray, or like a big, like some sheets so that they can do finger painting or something, that doesn't mean you don't have time to do something small. And I think another phrase, if I may say one of the phrases you said in the training, which I thought was great, was little and often, which I think is so important, because it's like, you don't need to sit down for even 5 minutes. You can play a game in 1 minute, and that might even be a fun idea of like, how can we play a game in 1 minute? So I think those are some really excellent tips, and sort of being kind to yourself and working out what's going to work for you, because what worked for someone else might not work for you, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Life is really busy. It's so important. You don't need a set time to play. You don't need a lot of time. You don't need expensive resources and gadgets. And they're all really important top tips. And I think another is that it's not about completing an activity or having a particular agenda, or there being a beginning and an end to this kind of play experience. It's about that moment and following the lead of your child and building that natural curiosity to learn and problem solve and discover and explore. Like that's that idea of a playful mind, viewing the world in a way that there are all these problems to solve and things to discover, and in every environment that you're in.
Thank you so much, Evie, for all of your tips and for joining us on the podcast today. That was excellent.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred app and join the conversation by using the hashtag PlayWellPodcast. And find out more about Play Scotland by following us on Twitter @PlayScotland and by visiting our website playscotland.org.